Disclaimer. This video contains scenes and personal opinions that some Linux users might find offensive. Viewer discretion is advised. Now on with the video. Okay, so I'm doing a video here on why I have sworn off Linux and gone back to Windows. Now this isn't going to be a video hating on Linux, although there is going to be a little bit of ranting going on because that's something I do. It's just that, well, for the things I want to do and the things I use my computer for, Linux is just not going to work. I tried it, and I think we can all agree it's just not for me. I will say though that there are a lot of things I like about Linux. I like how the desktops look. I like how it's focused on free and open source software. I like how when you've installed it, it's pretty much ready to go out of the box. And I like the fact that it's free. However, as they say, Linux is only free if you don't value your time. And Linux has just taken too much of that. So yeah, I've quit Linux and gone back to Windows 10 LTSC. But what's Windows LTSC, you ask? Well, it's Windows, but without the BS. It's basically designed for business, so there's no ads or bloat or anything like that. It's Windows the way it's supposed to be, and the version of Windows that I use. Unfortunately, Microsoft does not sell this to the general public. The best you can get from them is a 90-day trial version, but of course that doesn't mean there aren't any full versions of it floating around the internet. If I remember, someone uploaded it to GitHub of all places, and I think that's where I got my copy from. I might be wrong, I frequently am, but yeah. Now just to clarify, I'm not praising Microsoft, and I'm not trying to endorse piracy, I'm just keeping it real. I'm telling it like it is. So anyway, on with Linux. They say it's good to have a good first impression. And Linux distributions like Fedora and Linux Mint, they actually do give a really good first impression. At the start it may seem wonderful. I can do this, and I can do that. But it doesn't take long for the rose-tinted glasses to fall off, and expectation and reality to become two separate things. Linux looked great at the start, but it doesn't take too long until problems arise, and problems in my case that just don't make Linux a viable alternative to Windows. So if you use Linux and you can do all the things that you want to do on it and you're comfortable there, that's great. That really is great. I've got nothing against you, but for me, it's gonna have to be Windows. Not because I want to use it, but because I have to use it. And this is where the rant's going to start. Now when it comes to finding Linux versions of software you use or any good alternatives, well, good luck with that. Of course you could always install Wine for running Windows apps, and for the most part that does work. But you're always going to find that one app that just doesn't work. And yeah, finding Linux versions of Windows software does happen, but as you'll see later, it is quite rare. On Windows you can get pretty much anything, which I guess includes malware, but I guess it's a small price to pay when you can now run the world's biggest library of software and games. And besides, Windows Defender has become really good in recent years. I would even go so far as to say it's as good as a paid antivirus. So yeah, on Linux you get a nice software center, and I'm not gonna lie, it is nice. It lets you easily install your apps and everything, but I see a problem with that, which I'm going to go into later. Sadly though, some apps are just broken, like this one here, Pulse Effects. So I installed this because I needed something that could even out loud and quiet sounds when I'm watching videos or playing games, and this app has that, but it doesn't work.
Well, we only have nacho cheese and ranch chips in the house, so I had to improvise.
Right now you can see it's listed what is playing sound right now. And you should be seeing the Spectrum Analyzer, analyzing sound, but it shows nothing. Also, none of the effects do anything. No matter what I select, no matter what changes I make, nothing happens. Doesn't matter if it's a Linux app or a Windows app running in Wine, I get nothing in the pulse effects, even though it can clearly see what app is playing audio, but it does nothing. Windows has an auto audio level feature built in. And even better, it actually works. And sometimes apps just crash, like this simple text editor that decided to crash while loading a file. The text editor is not responding, and even the close dialog is not responding. How am I supposed to click on anything with a text cursor? Linux, why do you have to be like this? And sometimes the software you want just isn't anywhere in the software center, like Furnace Tracker here, which makes chiptunes. So what I did to get this was download it from the website, like how you would download a Windows app. I extracted the archive into a new folder, and just like on the Windows version, I get a nice executable that I can double click and run. However, some Linux apps don't even run. Like this game I found, Marble Arena 2. Now, this isn't available in the software center, so I downloaded it from the website like you would a Windows game. I unzipped it, double-clicked the executable, and nothing. It didn't even attempt to run. And yes, I made sure that allow executing file as program was checked, and it is, so yeah, go figure. Ironically enough though, the Windows version runs just fine in Wine in Linux. Yeah, I can play the Windows version in Linux, but not the Linux version in Linux. You know, the very OS that version of the game was actually designed for. So now let's try one of my all-time favourite games, The Simpsons Hit and Run. This even has the Lucas mod launcher, so I can make this even more fun. So let's play. Okay, so it looks like I'm not going to be able to run the mod launcher in Linux, but that's no problem. I'll just run the game normally and just have to go without mods. Yeah, this is good, isn't it? This is The Simpsons Hit and Run. This is what it's supposed to look like. Just a black screen. Glorious. Well, never mind anyway, that's put me in the mood for racing games. So let's go with one of the games from my Steam library. Team Sonic Racing. So yeah, that went really well, I think. Anyway, now let's try another game. Excuse me a minute. My chest is all gunked up with scunch again. Starting to turn into Patty and Selma. You think I'm smoking 100 cigarettes an hour? I only have one. Actually, I don't even smoke, but anyway, now how about some Poppy playtime? Chapter 2 is my favourite, so that's what we're gonna do. Well, let's just go into new game. And just look how lovely and smooth this intro video is playing. Yeah, this is how it's supposed to look. There's nothing wrong with this. In the actual game part of the game, it's nice and smooth, but the fog's all screwed up. At least I can still hold hands with Mummy.
Isn't this exciting, Poppy? Very exciting, Mommy.
Strangely enough though, Chapter 4 ran really well, and I thought this would be the one that gives me the most problems, but as you can see from the footage here, it's running really well. The intro video played and there's nothing wrong with the graphics. Chapter 1 worked really well too. The intro video played, the graphics displayed as they should, and Chapter 3 had no problem with the graphics, but the intro video didn't play. I could hear it, but not see it. Well, let's try another one of my all-time favourite games, Monster Truck Madness 2! So I'll just load it up here. And yeah, look at this. Another black screen. Also glorious. And yep, the game closed itself, and now my screen is now messed up. It's stuck at 640 by 480, and I cannot use the display settings to change it back, because all of the things that I need to click on are outside of the screen. Again, glorious. But one of the biggest problems that I have with Linux is when I download an app that's not available in the software center, and all I get is the source code. So I download an Arculator, which is an Acorn Archimedes emulator, so I could play the version of Lemmings that I used to play back in school. And this emulator is only available as source code. If I download the Windows version, I get a nice exe that I can double click and run. On Linux, no, I've only got source code, and I've got to build it myself. I don't know how to do that. I'm not a programmer. I swear, every Linux coder out there must think every other Linux user is a coder too. They must do, and we're not. Most average computer users, like myself, just want to use their computer and their software right away. I don't expect to have to compile it myself. That is the job of the programmer, not the user. It wouldn't be so bad if it actually works, but no. I type in this command to build the app, and all I get is errors. Something went wrong with this, something went wrong with that. It doesn't have something else it needs. Give me a break. I mean, sure, I could run the Windows version in Wine, because the Windows version comes ready right out the box, but that's beside the point. The Linux version should come ready out of the box too, because so help me God, I am not prepared to spend hours upon hours dicking around in that stupid goddamn terminal, looking up and trying to fix every error I get, only to get even more errors. That's just not how I roll. But I'm not done yet. We're going to talk much more about the terminal later. But like I was saying, it should be ready for the average computer user to just use right away. It's common sense. On Windows, right, after I download an app and unzip it if it needs unzipping, I don't have to go into the command prompt. I don't have to run scripts. I don't have to type in a bunch of commands that I don't even know what they do. I don't have to tear my hair out trying to compile the thing. A mouse click here, a mouse click there, boom, done. It just works. That's how it is on Windows. Why couldn't it be that way on Linux? Making desktop shortcuts is a no-go on Linux, especially if I want to make a shortcut to a Wine app. So if we take a look inside a shortcut, see all this text? This is what I would have to do if I wanted to make a shortcut if it doesn't automatically make one when I install something. And almost none of this text means anything to me. Why couldn't there be a simple way like on Windows? On Windows it's so much easier. Here's a program that I installed that didn't make a desktop shortcut, but because here on Windows they actually thought about this, all I have to do is hold right click on the file, drag it onto the desktop, and it gives me an option to make the shortcut. I could even rename it, put it into a different folder, it doesn't matter. All I have to do then is just double click and it runs. Now, how hard was that? Easy. So this one is a little bit of a nitpick here, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. And that's the start menu. Now, regardless of what Linux distro you choose, it comes preloaded with a bunch of stuff that I'm never going to use or even know what it is. And you think Windows is bloated? I mean, just look at this. Sometimes to find the app that I want, I have to go into all programs, scroll through a huge list until I finally find what I want, and it's just more complicated than it needs to be. Now on Windows, I can install OpenShell, and I can have my own custom start menu, which I've done right here. So I've got everything arranged in a nice logical way, so I've got quick and easy access to my programs and my files and whatnot. Now, why couldn't there be something like that for Linux? And if there is, I don't know about it. I'm going back to Wine for a second. There doesn't seem to be any way to register file types with Wine apps. So let's say I want to open this file here. I double click on it, and of course Linux doesn't know what to do with it. So I thought maybe I could point that to a program that's in my Wine prefix and that would work, but that didn't work. So obviously that's not how you do it. And I don't know what the right way to do it is, or even if there is a way. So yeah, that's another deal breaker. And on Windows I get pretty much the same thing, but unlike on Linux, I can actually point this to the program that opens the file and problem solved. Now it might ask one more time if I want to use that to open the file, but from then on it's set for life. Now some Windows apps just don't work fine in Wine anyway, so here I have an open modplug tracker tune that I made, and it uses VSTs that add effects to the sounds, and it doesn't matter if I'm using 64-bit plugins or 32-bit plugins, they all work thanks to Open Modplug Tracker's plugin bridge. But if I'm doing this on Linux, and let's say I'm running the 64-bit version of Open Modplug Tracker here, and I'm using 32-bit plugins, or vice versa, it doesn't show the GUI. The plugin bridge just doesn't work properly on Linux. On Windows it's fine, it doesn't matter if I'm running the 32-bit version or the 64-bit version, or I'm using 32-bit or 64-bit plugins. It just works the way it should. And here's another thing, I have to put in my password like every single time I want to do something. If I want to mount a drive, I've got to put in my password. If I want to install something, I've got to put in my password. If I want to do updates, I've got to put in my password. Even when I just want to open my web browser, I gotta put in my password. To call it grating is an understatement. And if I could, I would set it up so there's no passwords needed for anything. But of course, because it's Linux, it forces me to use one. Now remember when I was talking about the software center? Well, here's the problem I have with that. Even though it's nice and it's really easy to use, there's no way to save a backup copy of what you download. So let's say one day you're browsing the software center and you come across this wonderful app that's a real game changer and it makes your life so much better, and you wonder just how you did without it. Well, now let's say that one day something bad happens and you've got to reinstall your OS. So after you've done that, you go back to the software center to re-download this app, only to find it's not there. It's gone, it's not available anymore. That, or it's been replaced by an updated version that's nowhere near as good, and you're screwed. But on Windows this doesn't have to happen. As long as any app you download is portable or it has an offline installer, you're fine, because you can save a backup copy of that onto a USB or whatever. And this almost happened to me. So there's something I use called VMware Player, and this is a virtual machine manager, so I can run one OS inside of another, and I need this so I can run Windows XP inside of Windows 10, because I've got some apps that are just too old to run on Windows 10, so I run them in the virtual machine, and they run just fine. The problem is that version 16 was the last version that fully supports a Windows XP guest OS, and guess what? That's no longer available anymore. But because I was smart, and I saved it onto a USB while it was still available, along with a few other things, I can still install it and use it even though it's not available anymore. It's common sense. Something that just doesn't seem to exist on Planet Linux. I even saved the VMware tools as well. Now why couldn't there be an option in the Linux Software Center to save a backup copy of what you download? Like I said, common sense. And some apps on Linux just break after a while. So here I'm trying to run I don't know how you pronounce it, QEMU, something like that. So I can run a Windows XP guest OS, and it worked fine for the first few days. Now when I try to run it, all it does is bring up a full screen terminal that I cannot get out of. Linux, again, why do you have to be like this? And speaking of the terminal, oh god, why is this even a thing? Why is so much stuff on Linux dependent on using the terminal? It hardly ever works, and every problem I encounter, and every solution for the problems I encounter, all have one thing in common. It involves typing things into the terminal. And to rub salt into the wound, most of the time, it never works. They type something in, it works. I type the exact same thing in, it doesn't work. I mean, come on, it's 2025, not 1985. Have these people never heard of a GUI? Having to use the terminal so much, I might just as well be using MS-DOS. Does anyone remember that? When you had to type things into the computer to make it do things? Yeah, it's just like going back in time. To the bad old days. I hardly ever have to do this on Windows. You might think I'm making this video up just for a laugh. But no, I'm serious. Dead serious. That's how serious I am. I've never been so serious in my entire life. I will say though, since you went through all the trouble of waking me up, you must really, really love to test. I love it too. There's just one thing we need to take care of first. No, wait, wrong line. I will say though, if you're someone who just uses their computer for browsing the internet, doing office work, maybe even watching videos or listening to music, I actually recommend Linux. I honestly do. If you're someone who likes to tinker and get right down to the nuts and bolts of their OS, spend hours in the terminal typing in code and scripts and whatnot, Linux is probably a good choice for you too. For everyone else, I really don't recommend it at all. For someone who does music production or graphic design, Linux probably isn't for you. For anyone who does animation outside of Blender, Linux probably isn't for you either. And of course, for all you gamers out there, myself included, Linux isn't for you either. Even though my entire Steam library does work on Linux, as you saw earlier, some games don't work well. And when it comes to games outside of Steam, not all of them are going to work properly, if at all. So this is where Windows lives on my main hard drive, and this is where Linux lives. And Linux, being inadequate for my use, and not worth all the trouble you caused me. You just bought yourself a one-way ticket to oblivion. I'll see you, Smeghead. Alright, I don't know why I just turned into Lister there, but, now, I would use Linux if they just fixed all these issues. If it could run all my Windows apps. If there was some GUI-based way of installing things from source. And if it wasn't so dependent on using the terminal. I don't know why so much stuff on Linux is done that way. To me, doing so many things via the terminal, well, it just seems like a ridiculous way of doing things. When I'm doing things on Windows, I don't need to open a command prompt and start typing things. No, it can be done with a few mouse clicks, and I can actually see a graphical representation of what's going on. It's just such a much better idea. And with a graphical representation of things, I know where I am. I know what I'm doing. Something that a huge wall of text does not tell me. Most people like me are not going to know what they're doing. And it just takes up so much more time than what can be done with a few mouse clicks. Like I said, common sense. As a somewhat dyslexic person, I find that hard to use. You would not believe how many spelling errors my word processor picked up while I was writing the script. And at the end of the day, which would you rather have? An OS that, while it's made by an evil, greedy corporation that spies on you and sells your private data off to the highest bidder, but can run all your Windows games and apps reliably and has the largest library of software, like, ever? Or would you rather have an OS, although while being free and open source, doesn't have as much software and takes a lot of jumping through hoops and extra steps to get things done? I know what I'd go with. The Windows command prompt, in the very few times I've actually had to use it, it actually works, unlike the Linux terminal. Sorry, Linux. You were good, kid, real good. But as long as Windows is around, you'll always be second best, see? Yeah, Windows may be evil, but in my case it's a necessary evil. And there we go, no more Linux. Goodbye, Linux. And just to remind you, when I say Windows, I don't mean the regular Windows 10 and 11. I mean the LTSC versions of Windows 10 and 11, which is Windows without the BS. It's Windows the way it should be, and the OS I'm staying with.